Hello and welcome to the NBA Outlet presented by MIA+WAS+CHA+ORL.ATL. I'm your host, Nick Fay. With me, as always, Kory, Waldron, and special guest, Evan Dial. Today, we are talking Southeast Division offseason preview. What's up, fellas?
Hey, Nick. What's going on? Thanks for having me.
What's up, boys? I have a rash. I'm pretty sure it's poison ivy, but I may just be allergic to this division. I'm not really sure yet.
Your favorite squad, the Atlanta Hawks today. Evan's team, the Charlotte Hornets. We'll talk about that. But just a quick reminder, if you want to check out our other offseason previews, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OGBasketball.com, Google Play, and Dash Radio. But let's get started, guys. Started right off with the Miami Heat, 44-38. First in the division last year, 6th seed, got knocked out in the first round by the Sixers. Not an amazing season, not a ton of growth. Whiteside was kind of all over the place. What were your thoughts on the Heat last season?
It was kind of a mixed bag. There's definitely some bright spots. The rookie Bam Adebayo was huge. Kelly Olynyk proved to be a good signing. Downside, Whiteside just seemed disengaged and got worse in the season. Dion Waiters got hurt, making his contract look bad. But they definitely, became one of the toughest and best defensive teams in the league. Their lack of offensive firepower really showed, and it ended up, what most people thought they were, a playoff team, but a first round exit.
Yeah, this division is kind of weak, but that's besides the point, right? Miami, obviously, this is one of those teams that's just so well coached. So, they got an assortment of guys, no superstar on this roster. They barely have a couple all-stars. And yet again, they're a playoff team. Eric Spoelstra leads this, gritty team to the playoffs where they're ousted in 5. But I thought it was a good year. We got to see guys like Goran Dragic, I think, had a really good year. Wayne Ellington upped his value. As you mentioned, Kelly Olynyk coming over from Boston. I think he was a good signing. And then Josh Richardson showed us stretches of when he can be really effective. And then, of course, it was nice to see Dwayne Wade back in a Miami uniform towards the end of last year.
How much you guys think missing Dion Waiters hurt them?
Waiters the year before was really good and had a career year, and they definitely used it more offense. But I'm not the biggest if they had him they still would have lost to Philly. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think Waiters is a guy that would put this Miami team over the top. However, I do think just at times, because they do lack a guy who can kind of just go out there and get you buckets. Not that Dion Waiters is necessarily an efficient guy to go get you buckets with, but he does have that kind of mentality where he can go out and at least be aggressive. So I definitely think they missed the aggression that Dion Waiters brings to an offense.
If you guys had to pick, who would you say was the Heat's best player last season?
I will go with Josh Richardson. I think he was the most he's an incredible perimeter defender, and he proved his offense just enough. Everyone else was either a little too hot and cold or just kind of a one side of the floor kind of player. So I'll go Richardson.
I'm going to say Dragic, only because I think he is the best player on this roster. And was he not an all-star this year?
He was.
Yeah. Obviously, true. A boatload of guys had to get hurt for him to become an all-star, but still an all-star. And I think, Dragic kind of is the calming that for this Miami team. He doesn't do anything exceptionally well, but he's definitely the leader of this team to a degree.
Yeah, overall solid season. Like Evan said, tough defense, gritty team, but nothing super exciting. It's kind of what we expected, first round knockout. Looking at the cap situation, it's not great. They already have a guaranteed $116 million, very close to that tax line. What do you think about this cap situation?
As you said, it's not great, and they're dangerously close to the tax, so it really limits their free agent options. They're going to have to make a decision on Wayne Ellington, a player they kind of need because he's their only real shooter. But I think we'll probably talk about this later. Their best way to try to shed cap, and his value is kind of uncertain right now, is try to trade Whiteside and get rid of that contract.
Yeah, I think you're right. You hit the nail on the head. Whiteside's a bad contract, and if you're not going to be able to play him, he's obviously not happy there either anymore. A lot of these guys are going to be making money next year. Dragic still is $18 million, James Johnson $14.5 million. Dion and Kelly Olynyk are making $11 million. And then Tyler Johnson now, who made just $5.8 million last year, is going to be making $19.2 million.
Shout out Sean Marks.
Yeah, right. The Brooklyn Nets once again sting some other team's cap space. But I mean, if you can maybe move Tyler Johnson, because I mean, I like Tyler Johnson, but I mean, by no means is he a $19.2 million a year player. And I think if you got rid of Tyler Johnson, maybe Richardson can pick up some more minutes, and I think Richardson deserves those minutes over a Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, definitely a couple contracts. Just they have so many guys making over 10 mil that probably are borderline 10 mil type players. And then they have guys that you don't really know what you're getting. I think they definitely are going to look to drop some cap moving into that trade. Maybe they might have to pair it with a Winslow or somebody, because not to mention these guys are overpaid. It's not like any of these contracts are really like, oh, all right, I'll take that guy. I don't mind. I think most of them you need some type of plus, and the Heat don't have the first round pick this year, which really hurts.
Yeah, you brought up my next point, and I wouldn't be shocked at all if they try to include Winslow in a deal to either trade into the first round or to try to unload a bad contract with him, will either be Waiters or Whiteside, because I think Winslow, some teams are still high on, so they may be able to get a good deal if they include him, even though it might be a little painful.
I would love to get Winslow. I mean, if it meant giving up a first-round pick, I don't think that's terrible. He improved his three-point shooting last year. He still has that defensive potential. There's still a lot to work with. He's dealt with a lot of injuries his first few seasons in the NBA. But talking about team needs, what do you think the Heat need to add this offseason if they're able to?
Ooh, shooting and more just people who just put it on the floor and score. I mean, you just saw in the playoffs how stagnant their offense. I mean, they were relying on Dwayne Wade most of the time, and he's 37 and may not even come back next year. So Dragic's getting older. So, I mean, they just need to find just some more firepower and especially three-point shooting.
Yeah, I lean towards like a playmaker because there's no really point guard on this team. Everybody, like Goran Dragic's more of a two guard, a slashing guard, if you will. He can facilitate a little bit, but there's no one on this team who can really, facilitate for others. So I think they need a playmaker, somebody who can get other guys involved. And then, like you mentioned, in today's NBA, you can't seem to have enough shooters. So adding more shooters would, of course, help spread the floor and maybe even give guys like Whiteside more of a chance to play.
Yeah, just offensive firepower, of that shooting, that's playmaking, that's a bucket getter. They just need any type of pop to that offense, because defensively they're still tough. They're gritty. They're going to grind out games, but they have a problem scoring, and they need to address that this offseason. Looking at team free agents, we have Udonis Haslem. There's a chance that he may retire. Dwayne Wade, obviously. Wayne Ellington, who we've mentioned. Luke Babbitt's another guy. Looking at the team free agents, what are you guys thinking?
Well, I mean, Wade, the ball's in his court. I mean, he's means so much to that franchise. It's just about whether or not he wants to come back. Haslem is whatever. And then and then Ellington, I believe is he restricted or unrestricted?
He's unrestricted.
Okay. So, he's just a guy, it's if the price is the right kind of deal. He really boosted his value. He had a career year, which was kind of surprising. So, I wouldn't be surprised he maybe gets a bigger deal elsewhere, but I think the Heat would like to keep him, certainly.
Yeah, I know Ellington had the most threes from anyone coming off the bench last year. I think Ellington, again, like you said, Evan, it's got to be a friendly deal for him to come back to Miami. I think he's almost surely gone. And then Haslem, if he wants to come back for the vet minimum, I believe he comes back. But like Nick said, he might be leaning towards retiring. And then for Wade, I think Miami's going to offer Wade a contract, and it's going to be up to Wade to accept it if he wants to. And I'm not sure. I don't think there's been anything about this, but I know Wade wasn't positive he was going to play next year, but I'm sure he's leaning towards playing.
Yeah, and you mentioned Haslem. He might go into like a coaching or a front office role with the Heat. He's been there, I believe, his whole career. Great leadership guy. He's big on that Heat culture. And you guys talked Ellington. Ellington's bounced around a lot the last few seasons. I'd expect him to look for a long-term deal to kind of sit somewhere and stay there a few years. So if the Heat want to offer him that, or somebody else in free agency definitely will, because like you guys mentioned, three-point shooting is very important in this NBA. But moving on from there, let's talk possible trades. Evan just dropped a great piece on OTGBasketball.com, 5 teams and some that might make a trade this offseason, or that will make a trade this offseason.
Yeah, I dropped a lot. And, well, for the Heat, I dropped Whiteside. And it's honestly tough to find a deal for him because his contract's so large and so few teams have money this offseason. I would. So the one I did is Dallas has some money, and Nerlens Noel didn't work out for them, but they might want to take a gamble on another talented big man, so they could send him to Dallas and maybe get Noel and Harrison Barnes in return. I mean, Noel could use a fresh start with a great coaching system in Miami, and then they would get a little more offensive firepower with Harrison Barnes. So that is one deal I'd look to explore if I was Miami.
Interesting. I definitely got to check out that article. Something for me to read tonight. I don't know. I'm with the same boat. I think if they make any trades, it's going to be either Whiteside or Tyler Johnson, or maybe a package deal with like Tyler Johnson and Justin Winslow, or Justin Winslow and Whiteside. The only way I can see Whiteside getting moved, I can see Whiteside possibly going to Phoenix, and maybe Phoenix doesn't draft 8 and they end up drafting Doncic. Like maybe they make a move for a center. There's been rumors about them wanting to acquire some type of center. But again, there's not a huge market for Whiteside. I like your idea of him possibly going to Dallas, but Whiteside just doesn't fit in today's modern NBA. Obviously, I don't know if you guys saw, he put up like a Snapchat of him shooting threes or whatever in practice, which means absolutely nothing. Like someone posted today, Ben Simmons shooting threes. Like, bro, it's practice. Like I see these guys make threes all the time. Zaza makes threes.
I can hit threes. I'm not in the NBA.
Yeah, right. And you're standing still.
Exactly.
So, I just don't think there's a huge market. I think Miami's going to struggle to make any trades unless they, like you mentioned earlier, Nick, like package a Winslow or somebody like that with one of these big contracts, because there's not a lot of cap space out there in the NBA right now.
And looking at Whiteside, obviously the comments he's made about Spoelstra not playing the fourth quarter, not dealing with the benching the right way, at that $25.4 million this season, and then a player option next year for $27 million. It's tough. He's like pretty much a salary dump because he's just not a great fit in this NBA, and you're probably not going to be able to play him in the fourth quarter. And the attitude issues definitely bring up something. Like, do you guys think a team would actually want to take on Whiteside without getting some type of benefit from it, like including a Winslow?
I mean, I think it's still possible, but I think it's just on the unlikely side. Teams may be enamored that they could get the best version of Whiteside out of him with a fresh start, but I mean, he really did hurt his value a lot in the playoffs this year with just an awful showing.
You almost have to like go to the players of a team that's interested in acquiring for him and being like, guys, what do you think about playing alongside Hassan Whiteside? And just see how they react. And, if they think he can fit in, then maybe you make a move for him. Otherwise, I don't know if I'd risk it.
Yeah, and like, you mentioned, Evan, in the playoffs, he had an opportunity to be a dominant fourth with Embiid being banged up a little bit of that series, and he just really wasn't. Do you guys think they could possibly move James Johnson? He's been a big piece, and they obviously need to move cap, and he's probably one of the more friendly contracts, obviously 14.6 and then 15.3 next year. It's not great, but I think he's a little bit more valuable than somebody like a Whiteside to a team.
I think it's certainly possible. I would guess he stayed because he just really reinvented himself there, and I think he loves it so much. And he just fits that team so well and is kind of just a Swiss Army knife player. But if they can package him to unload one of their worst deals, I think they'll certainly look into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think James Johnson could help a lot of teams that are like on that cusp of being contenders. Like Evan said, he's a what'd you say, a switchblade? He's a switchblade
Swiss
army knife. He's a Swiss Army knife. Yeah, I mean, he does a little bit of everything. He plays a small forward. He can play the power forward. I'm sure if you wanted to, he might be able to play some small ball 5 in today's world because he is a bruiser. He has. That guy can beat you up. That's one. I think he like does mixed martial arts. Like there's a few times when, like people go at him. It's like you probably don't want to mess with that man. Like that's a guy that you literally don't want to mess with.
Yeah, he's a tough dude.
But I think because he does do a little bit of everything, then you surely could find some kind of team that would use James Johnson, and he could be effective on, because like you mentioned, Evan, his time in Miami has really rejuvenated his career.
Yeah, it's been incredible what they've done with him, and obviously Miami's been known for getting a lot out of players, including conditioning. We talked about Wayne Ellington. Kory mentioned this has been a career year for him, so interesting to see what happens with the Heat. Obviously, Pat Riley likes to be more successful. He doesn't like first-round knockouts. So like Evan mentioned in his article, it'd almost be a guarantee the Heat make a trade. If you guys had to put a percentage on it, what are the chances the Heat make a trade this offseason?
100. They'll make at least one trade this offseason.
I'll say 65%. I think it's highly likely. I don't know. I just don't know who it would be. So I'll say 65.
Yeah, I think it's pretty likely. I mean, I'd probably like 80 or 90. I think it's about finding a suitor, but I also could see them making a smaller trade, even if maybe Wayne Ellington was in a sign and trade with another team. Not saying he's a big time commodity, but just because there's so much limited amount of cap that maybe they could get something back in return like that. But talking about possible targets for the Heat, what are you guys thinking? Obviously, they're really close to that cap line, so this isn't a situation where they're probably getting rid of a contract.
Well, yeah, that's why I think they're a lock to make a trade, because they can't even really think about free agents right now because they're so close to the tax unless they do make a trade. So that's why I just think they're a lock to move before they can even think. And I know there's some big dreams about like a LeBron reunion or something crazy, but I mean,
God bless.
Those are just so far fetched unless they just unload some cap space.
Yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. For them to do anything, first and foremost, you need to unload one contract or so. And then when you look at free agents, I wouldn't be surprised if they went after, some shooter like a Seth Curry, perhaps. Maybe if Tony Parker wants to come, they go after him for some, veteran playmaking. But also at some point, like, you have to think Miami's going to start maybe going younger because they seem to have I don't know the exact age of this group, but it doesn't strike me as a very young core. But yeah, like you mentioned, Evan, somebody's got to be moved for this team to really explore free agency fully.
I could also see them going after maybe like a Jeff Green or a Doug McDermott, like you kind of mentioned, some of those vet minimum guys that we've mentioned on some of the previous previews, just because they don't have the cap. And even if they do get some cap space, they're still going to be over the cap and they're just going to be closer to that tax line. So there's not really a ton of options for them. Moving on to another team that is really cap strapped, and that's the Washington Wizards. 43-39, 8th seed last year, knocked out in the first round by the Raptors. Obviously, John Wall missed a ton of time. He never looked himself, and it was a great season from Bradley Beal, but overall, I think a disappointing season for the Wizards. What were your thoughts on them?
I mean, they're frustrating. They're always filled with drama, whether, they're better without Wall, and then the Gortat thing and Wall and Beal. But they did make it to the playoffs, and, they did take the Raptors to 6, whatever that's worth, and I thought John Wall looked good. They had a good find in Satoransky, who I like a lot, but then Porter got hurt. So, I mean, if you had to label their season, it's inconsistent, injury-plagued, and this Wizards team has never been able to reach what I think was a very high ceiling when they're at their best.
Yeah, they're disappointing. They let you down. They're one of the teams that even in the regular season they look good at times, and they have so many bad losses. Even before Wall got hurt, that team was very vocal. If you recall, the first time they played the Lakers, there's a lot of trash talk about Gortat saying Wall is going to go right at Lonzo. And the Lakers lost, or the Lakers won, I believe, in overtime. Beal and Wall saying they believe they're the best team in the East. And, of course, injuries changed a lot of that. But I think we saw that the writing's kind of on for this Wizards team. They have a lot of money locked up, and the team they currently have just isn't good enough to win, or at least win titles.
Yeah, it's like they have a good core together with Bradley Beal, Otto Porter, and John Wall, but then some of the other contracts really hurt them. And like you mentioned, they're just like a team. They like make you believe in them a little bit, and then all of a sudden they just let you down. So just an overall disappointing season. Their cap situation isn't much better. Over the cap, very close to being hard cap. Most likely Jason Smith and Meeks are going to take their player option, which is going to hard cap them. So what do you expect from the Wizards this offseason cap-wise?
Well, yeah, you're right. I just saw today Meeks did take his player option. So it really limits the Wizards. They can offer Oubre and try to package him with a bad contract. They can offer their first round pick, which they've done for I think the past couple years, to try to unload some more salary. I mean, I think they'll keep the core 3 together, Wall, Beal, and Porter. They may try to get rid of Gortat and Markieff Morris especially, and just they need some more athleticism in the front court, and probably packaging either their first Oubre with a bad contract is the best way to open up some space.
I actually think they're going to make – I have the Wizards as a team I think DeMarcus Cousins might end up on when free agency is done. I think DeMarcus Cousins could be heading to Washington because I think there could be some kind of move where we see Otto Porter in like a sign-in trade with the Pelicans for DeMarcus Cousins. But I definitely agree that they have to move a Gortat or a Mahinmi And the only way you're going to move one of those contracts, which next year, it's 15 and 13 and a half.
Yikes.
You're going to have to package a Kelly Oubre or, definitely a Kelly Oubre and then probably like a first-round draft pick. Because, it's absurd some of the money they paid after these bigs.
It's crazy they have so much money locked it up in bigs that aren't that great. I think Markieff Morris is going to be the easiest contract to move at 8.6 expiring. If they were to pair that with a first-round pick, I think that's something a team would take on. My Nets would definitely look at that. I don't think that's a terrible deal. Then you look at next year, you're paying John Wall $37 million. So their contracts really don't get much better. And Kory mentioned the possible sign and trade. Otto Porter contract, Sean Marks strikes again. I think that's really hurting their books. He's a great player, but for that price, especially in the Wizards system, I don't think it's really helping them. He'd be a guy I would keep an eye on. But talking Wizards, what are some team needs?
Their front court and forever their bench. Satoransky helps a little bit until Scott Brooks decided not to trust him in the playoffs, and Oubre has been a little hit and miss. But they definitely need depth up front. Mahimi's not reliable, and they were playing like Mike Scott as an undersized center at some point. So, if they can find a way to open up books and then try to go after Derek Favors, I doubt they can open up space, or as Kory said, a sign trade Cousins, but they need some front court and bench help desperately.
Yeah, spot on. For me, it's really the bench. I think every year we look at this Wizards bench team and it gets worse and worse despite some optimism we have going into the offseason. When they first signed Tim Frazier, I was thinking, well, this could be pretty good for them. He had some nice moments in New Orleans, and then he comes and he doesn't even play in Washington. Satoransky, he had some nice moments, but like you said, Evan, Scott Brooks decided not to play him. And some of your key bench guys are Jason Smith, Mahimi, and Jody Meeks. Mike Scott, his mid-range jump shot and 3 points was lock on last year. He was actually probably their best bench player.
Big postseason.
Yeah, then Kelly Oubre is just so up and down. You just never know what you're going to get from night-to-night basis.
Yeah, you guys were spot on. Like you said, better bench, better bigs, maybe a pick and roll partner for John Wall and Bradley Beal that can roll to the rim, a 3-point shooting that can always spread the floor for Wall. I think that's when he's at his best. But looking team free agent wise, we already mentioned the player options for Smith and Meeks. Obviously, Frazier's a free agent. Mike Scott's a free agent. Ty Lawson, who signed on late last season, is a free agent. Ramon Sessions, free agent. What are you guys thinking in their team free agency?
Well, I think Mike Scott, he was probably their best bench player. So if they can keep him for cheap, I think they would look to do that. I think everyone else really, though, even though Smith and Meeks are going to opt in, but the other guys like Lawson or Sessions, they'll all just let them go is my guess.
Yeah, I think if Mike Scott wants to come back, you bring him back. Jason Smith, I let him go. Obviously, Jody Meeks is back. I think if Ty Lawson, I think I would possibly offer him the vet min only because you've had bad point guard play. We know Ty Lawson has been, he was once good, really good in Denver.
I think he was okay for them last year too.
Yeah, I just don't think he just didn't have any reps with the team. I think they signed him right before the playoffs started or something like that. He just didn't have any reps. So I think they give him a chance. But again, he's been, DUIs and everything else. He's kind of been a head case. So, I don't know if they want to bring a guy like that back. But I think most of these free agents they're going to let walk.
Yeah, and I think Mike Scott, the one guy they want to bring back, they might not be able to because I could see somebody offering him a little bit better deal, especially after his postseason play. But talking possible trades, what are we thinking trade-wise for the Wizards?
I think you made a good point about Morris. He's probably the easiest contract to move, and if they could attach to pick them, that's definitely doable. The Otto Porter sign-in trade is possible, but it's still unlikely just because the contract is still so much. And then it's just Oubre or Satoransky, and I would explore moving one of them around and see how much return you can get. But I just don't think they move any of their big fish. I think it would be all smaller with the goal of just trying to unload some payroll.
Yeah, I'm sticking with my outlandish, not outlandish, but my big fish trade of sign-in trade with DeMarcus Cousins for Otto Porter and I don't know, whatever else you have to package. I don't know what the DeMarcus Cousins deal would look like, but I'm sure it'd be right around that $25 to $30 million range because he's looking for big money, but he's obviously going to take a little bit of a drop, which actually could benefit the Wizards. But that's my trade.
I think it would almost be a lock that the Wizards trade their first-round pick too, because like we mentioned, they're probably going to be at that tax line, and number 15 overall pick usually has a cap hold of 2.7 mil. So I think they don't even want to take on a rookie contract at this point. They'll probably look to pair that with somebody else and definitely drop a contract. So this would be another team that's pretty likely to make a trade. I mean, ideally they'd like to get rid of Mahinmi, but that's going to be the hardest one to move. I think Gortat or Morris is really likely. Even Jason Smith or Jody Meeks, I think maybe in a combo deal, you maybe move both of them. You know, Satoransky or Oubre too, you're giving up young talent, but it might help you open up some cap. And even if they do open up some cap, the problem is that they're not going to have a ton of, space to add a big-time player. The ideal situation would be what Kory mentioned, where they're able to work some type of sign and trade for DeMarcus Cousins. Obviously, we know the relationship he has with John Wall. It's just, will the Pelicans be interested? Do they want to take up a long-term contract like Porter, or do they want to work on some other type of deal where they're getting some other assets?
I mean, that trade's super interesting. I would love Porter on the Pelicans because they need a wing so badly. The one other trade I was floating around is I wouldn't be shocked they throw a first-rounder Morris and say Satoransky to Cleveland and try to get Kevin Love. That's one I think that could be possible.
Yeah, I think they might have to put in Gortat or Mahinmi to make the money work, but I think that wouldn't be a bad deal, especially if you know LeBron's leaving. And like I said, I think they're definitely moved that first-round pick. And I wouldn't be surprised if Porter's on the move, not even just in New Orleans. Obviously, the Nets had interest in him last year. I'm not sure if they still do. Sacramento also had a lot of interest in Porter last year, so that could be another spot for him as well.
I like the thought of possibly them trading for Kevin Love. That could be interesting.
Yeah, it would be a perfect compliment to John Wall and Bradley Beal having a stretch big on the floor like that you can run the pick and roll with a little bit. Gives them some more offensive options too. I think for the Wizards, one thing that really hurt them last year is John Wall. I don't think at any point last season was 100%.
No, not at all until the playoffs was when he looked the best, and it was a little too late. But yeah, rough season overall.
Yeah, I remember watching him one game, and he was playing the Nets, and I remember Spencer Dinwiddie outplaying him, and I love Spencer, but he's not on John Wall's level, and I was just like, this dude's knee is not right, and then I think it was like a week or two later, he missed the next 41 games. But talking free agent targets, obviously we mentioned they don't have much cap, so they're pretty much looking at all veteran minimum guys, even if they do decide to add anybody. Who do you have in mind?
I mean, if they can somehow open up space and get, Favors or Tyreek Evans, but I doubt they'll be able to open up enough space to do that. So, I mean, then you're looking at minimum guys, shooters, maybe even McBuckets for the bench, another shooter, something like that. But they're, again, like Miami, not a ton of options.
Yeah, I've dubbed McDermott as one of my guys they may target. Depending on how much a guy like Hazonia might demand on the market. Maybe even a Tony Parker if he leaves San Antonio. Because for me, a backup point guard could be so crucial just to give John Wall some more time. Maybe Bellinelli, but I think he's going to but he might get more money on the market right now.
Yeah.
So some of those guys would be players I look at.
And it's still tough because pretty much all they can offer is the veteran minimum unless they do open up the cap. I mean, Jamal Crawford might be a guy. Obviously, he's a little bit washed up at this phase. Joe Johnson maybe. Nerlens Noel, if he's looking to take a 1-year veteran minimum deal and then kind of work on his value for the next year. Brandon Wright, possibly. He's been banged up a lot in his career. I think they could look for a backup point guard like Kory mentioned, or some type of rim running big. If they had a nice big that could actually roll to the rim like Gortat used to be able to, I think that would really help Wall and Beal.
Ooh, I love the Noel idea. If they can probably get him on a cheap short-term deal, that makes a ton of sense.
It would really work out, and they can get his head straight and, get him to really grind into it, and John Wall and him would make a nice combo. But it's obviously a lot of wishful thinking for the Wizards. But moving on here to Evan's team, the Charlotte Hornets, 36-46. I would say probably a disappointing season. No playoffs, a lot of injuries. They fired Steve Clifford, brought in a new coach. How do you pronounce his last name?
James Borrego.
Borrego. I know I kind of messed that up last time I talked about him on the pod, but Borrego, he's a good guy to have in. Obviously, they're still dealing with that Batum contract. Their young guys didn't really get a ton of play last year. What were your thoughts, Evan, on the season that the Hornets had last year?
It was rough, just a grind. Just the chemistry was just off. A lot of close losses, a lot of injuries. The young guys didn't get an opportunity till the end and early. They took a lot of bumps, and then just a lot of players just got worse. I mean, MKG had a down year. Batum was really bad. Zeller was hurt most of the season. And everyone else was just kind of all right besides Kemba. And then you add it all up and you have a 36-win team, and then it led to a whole new, GM and a coach. So definitely a down year.
Yeah, this is a team I feel like every year I have high expectations for, and they just completely make me rethink my knowledge on basketball. I've never been a fan of the Nicholas Batum contract, and this year was a prime example why. It only gets worse from here too. $24 million this upcoming year, then $25.5 million to the last year, where it's $27.1 million. I mean, obviously he had an elbow injury right early in the season, a UCL injury or whatever. So maybe he just never got right from that, but he definitely wasn't good. Marvin Williams, I think he's steady. Like you said, MKG. I mean, besides the defense, he just gives you nothing offensively. And then the boatload of injuries. Kemba Walker was stellar, though. I think. Again, this year, he made more people around the league realize that Kemba was just so gifted, just on the wrong team or in the wrong environment. And I think Dwight Howard had a really nice year, too. I think he surprised a lot of people. Obviously, had that big 30-30 game or whatever against the Nets. Yeah. But there weren't a lot of bright spots for this Hornets team, especially when they didn't play any of their young talent, really. A lot of MCW, which I think I'm sure made you lose a lot of brain cells. And then, of course, the firing of the GM and the head coach.
What do you think, Evan, was the biggest reason Malik Monk didn't see big minutes? Like, obviously, there was a lot of hype after drafting him, a lot of hype, bringing him in this season, having a big, I think even some people posted him as maybe a Rookie of the Year candidate, and we really didn't see a ton of him last year.
He just can't defend, or couldn't, at least early on, and Clifford is a defensive guy, and he was really hurting us on that end of the floor. And that's why, even though Michael Carter-Williams can't make a basket for his life, he can at least just play a solid defense. So he got minutes above Monk until the end of the season. But hopefully that changes next year and he has a little more opportunity to show his skills.
Looking at the cap situation for the Hornets, it's obviously not pretty. You guys mentioned the Batum contract, some other big contracts on there. They're pretty close to that tax line before even the offseason starting. What are your thoughts on the situation?
It's rough. I mean, they're almost capped out for a team that won 36 games, so that's not a situation you want to be in. And like these other teams, their main goal of the offseason is going to be to shed payroll via trade, and unfortunately, their best way to do that is probably attaching Kemba Walker to one of those deals because he still has high value. I'm not sure that's a certain, though. They can make some smaller moves and try to, trade MKG, trade Jeremy Lamb, Cody Zeller, players who are still young and solid and may have a little bit upside and not on terrible deals. But moving the Batum deal will be, mission impossible.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they moved a Cody Zeller or a Marvin Williams. I think Marvin Williams could be useful on a team that's somewhat contending because he is kind of like that stretch four. But like you said, it feels like they may have to attach Kemba. They really want to get rid of one of the bigger ones. And I'm just staring at the cap space and looking at Nicholas Batum's contract, and it's just so wild to me that he really got $108 million or whatever it was.
It's large.
Yeah, it's rough for them to try and move one of these guys. Because what's their draft pick situation like over the next 3 years, Evan?
I mean, we have our firsts for all the next upcoming year, so that's good. I really would doubt if we trade our first round pick this year because we want to go younger, and I think a rebuild is coming. So at least we have that, but I think they would rather use Kemba or maybe a player like Lamb to try to unload salary rather than draft picks.
Makes sense, especially like you said, Evan. It looks like a rebuild is probably coming, and I actually had Dylan on the Brooklyn Buzz and I asked him about a possible trade with that pick, and it looks like they pretty much want to keep that pick. They have a chance of getting a really good player that could drop to an 11. So the books aren't pretty, but and you got to worry about if you do keep Kemba, you have to re-sign him next offseason, which he'll be getting a big deal as well.
Right, that's the other thing, and that also makes trading him a little bit trickier because the team that trades for him has to believe that they can re-sign him in 2019. So that's one thing. I don't think a Kemba trade is a lock, even though it probably is our best way to unload some salary. But yeah, with the 11th pick, we should still be able to get a really solid player. So I doubt we move it.
Talking team needs, what does this Hornets team need to add? Obviously limited cap space, but they still need to make some upgrades to if they want to compete for that 8th seed.
Shooting is definitely one. We're a really bad shot-making team besides Kemba, and that hurt us in a lot of clutch time situations as team loaded up on him. And then, just the bench besides Lamb and I guess Zeller when he's healthy, no one else was really consistent off the bench on either end. So definitely have to get deeper and a little younger. So as Kory said, a player like Marvin Williams may be moved. I don't think Dwight gets moved in the offseason, but probably towards the deadline, maybe to a contender. And I think a youth movement is coming.
Yeah, I think the team needs a facelift. Just go for a full facelift for this one. I think if you're looking for what they can add, 3-point shooting, some bench scoring for sure. Any bench that features Michael Carter Williams Jr. probably isn't in the best shape of things.
True.
So I mean, I would just try to add some younger pieces, some shooters. But aside from that, I think the real need is just to get out of under some of these contracts.
Yeah, I think that is a big need, Kory, getting out of some of these contracts, getting some more youth in there. And like Kevin said, just some shot makers, some shooters. Do you think leadership is a problem for this team at all or not really?
The locker room used to be really good. This year was probably it was the first year it started going sour. Marvin Williams is probably the strongest leader on the team. Dwight obviously does come with some issues. So, yeah, I could say it could be improved, but not awful.
Not a hampering issue compared to some of the contracts. Talking team free agency, they don't have a ton of free agents. We mentioned Michael Carter Williams. Graham, I know that's a guy that you like. Evan, what are your thoughts on the free agent situation in terms of team free agents?
Yeah, so MC Dub's gone. Doubt we resign him. Graham, I do like, and I would like to keep him, but I think another team will offer him a little more money than we want to pay, so I think he's gone as well.
Yeah, I don't see them keeping almost any of these free agents. If you want to bring back, I guess, Marcus Page because he's a two-way player, maybe you bring him back. I know he played for the Greensboro Swarm, but outside of that, I don't know if you want any of these guys back.
Let's talk trades. Obviously, Evan mentioned the Hornets as his number one team to make a trade this offseason in his article. So hit me with some trade scenarios.
So there's a couple little ones they could do if they don't want to include Kemba. One that I think makes some sense is Michael Kidd-Gilchrist to Chicago for Holiday and Grant. You shed about $7 million in cap, and you get 2 rotation players. Grant's an upgrade over Michael Carter Williams, a backup point guard, and Holiday just a rotation wing. And it's going to be moves like that. Zeller to Sacramento for Kufos and Frank Mason, a young point guard, shed a little bit of salary. I think those are the small moves the Hornets are going to look to make. And then the interesting one is Denver to agree to take on the Fareed contract to get their 14th overall pick first and just send them MKG and Frank Kaminsky maybe. That's one. If they can get an extra first-round pick and unload a little salary, I mean, that's the ultimate win and goal.
So the trade I'm looking at is the thought of Kemba Walker possibly becoming an Indiana Pacer. I know there were some rumors last year. And, of course, the Pacers have some friendly contracts. So maybe the Pacers – and they came out today that Thaddeus Young might decline his player option, which then frees up another $14.9 million off the Pacers' books, which then, to me, makes them a for-sure player in maybe a trade or free agency. So maybe the Pacers, they trade for Kemba Walker and they take a contract like Marvin Williams and they throw in Bogdanovich, Collison, and then one of their younger guys like TJ Leaf or obviously everyone else is a free agent, but something like that.
Yeah, and the Pacers also have a lot of guys that are on guaranteed contracts. I don't know when they become guaranteed. Bogdanovich, Collison, and Al Jefferson are all on guaranteed for 2018-19, which is ideal for a team like the Hornets because they can make the trade and then cut the player, and then they're shedding cap right there.
Bingo.
Yeah, I like that deal. That makes sense.
And then also the Pacers have their first-round pick, and like Evan mentioned, at this point, the Hornets are trying to add any young players they can if a rebuild is coming. So definitely a possible trade partner. Evan, tell me a little bit about the proposal for the Cavs and Kemba.
So, it would only work if the Cavs want to make a last-ditch effort to try to help keep LeBron. And basically, we would send Kemba to the Cavs in exchange for the 8th overall pick, or we could swap picks. And, there'd have to be some fillers. We would have to take on the George Hill salary. And in exchange, we could unload one of ours, maybe throw in Kaminsky and maybe Dwight Howard or Marvin Williams, something like that. I guess it's possible, but I think that's kind of a dreaming trade scenario. But if Cleveland wants to try to make a last-ditch effort, it does make some sense.
And Kemba's a good player you can get on a salary that's not that crazy this year. At 12 mil, that's a bargain, especially for the play of Kemba Walker.
Absolutely.
Kory, what about you? Any other scenarios you're thinking for Kemba to possibly get traded?
I like the thought of Cleveland possibly going after him because I know there were some rumors last offseason too. I'm not against maybe even like the San Antonio Spurs. Maybe they go after him to try and add some kind of firepower next to Kawhi Leonard. But again, I don't know how much or what it's going to take to get Kemba. If it takes a draft pick, I'm not sure if teams are going to want to take a draft pick because, again, he is a free agent next offseason, and he's going to be expecting, near max money.
Yeah, I feel like he'll definitely get the max. And I think, I think for the Hornets, what they really ideally would like to do is get a draft pick and drop one of these contracts, not necessarily the Batum contract, but like Evan mentioned, maybe it's a Zeller, maybe it's a MKG, maybe it's a Marvin Williams, some guy that could actually kind of help you a little bit, but he's just slightly overpaid.
Absolutely. And I think that's like the Kemba checklist. If we can unload one bad contract plus get a first-round pick or a really solid young player, then I think we pull the trigger. But I think all of those would have to happen.
Are there any targets in free agency that you want the Hornets to go after, or do the cap situation you want them to kind of stay away from everything?
Yeah, I'd focus on shedding payroll first via trades, but then, you can make smaller moves. Like if your guy, Jeremy Lin, declines his option, wants a reunion in Charlotte, I would love that. Something like that, a backup point guard, a veteran, just to get some more depth. A player like that, I think, who we could get for fairly cheap and wants to kind of bet on himself, makes some sense.
I think he already accepted. In that 12 mil, he wasn't going to turn it down.
I love him.
Yeah, no, he's good. I've enjoyed him in Brooklyn when he's actually played. Injuries have been the big problem for Jalen.
Right.
Yeah.
Such a shame.
It's tough obviously because of the cap and all that. But maybe they add, like a Seth Curry. They bring him on to, you bring a little Curry magic back to the Hornets. Del Curry, I think, does play-by-play or sideline reporting for the Hornets.
Yeah.
So I'm sure, and people have always kind of linked or tried to link Steph Curry possibly in the future coming back to Charlotte. So maybe they get the younger brother instead. Maybe a Tony Parker, a Mario Hezonja, just younger pieces to kind of move this differently or get some backup vets.
Yeah, I think
Curry.
Yeah, a diamond in the rough type of young player, maybe take somebody on a 1-year deal. Curry would be a nice thought, but again, they probably need to work some cap to find space to sign even him or Hezonja just because their money is so locked up with some of these contracts. But there is a good possibility they, move one of these contracts or they move Kemba Walker with a contract. But moving on to the next team in the division, Orlando Magic, 25-57. They had a really hot start. I think they started like 9-4 or something like that, or 8-4. And the rest of the season, they went 17-53. So that's just like really disappointing your fans. No real direction. It feels like Orlando has been in this situation for, 5 years. It's like, every year we look at them, are they still in rebuild mode? And the answer is yes. They fired Vogel. They brought in Steve Clifford from the Hornets as their new head coach. What are your thoughts on the Magic?
They had the hot start, which gave, some excitement, but then they just injuries and then things unraveled so quickly. And They've become the kings of the East, honestly. I mean, just past 5 years, they've given up on all their young players way too quickly. Oladipo, Tobias Harris, Elfrid Payton. I mean, and then they combine that with signing awful contracts like Bismack Biyombo. And it's just led to an absolute just pit. And now, I mean, Clifford, I like the hire to bring some stability, but they have to hit in this year's draft for sure.
I mean, yeah, this team, I still remember all the hype that was coming, and it was just absurd because, I mean, I feel like they do this. They did this a couple of years ago with Oladipo. They had a really hot start, and they came back down to earth. I like the comparison of the Orlando Magic being the kings of the East. Yeah. That's pretty good. Yeah. And yeah, you know, the Bismack Biyombo the combo of Bismack Biyombo's contract and Evan Fournier is you know, not ideal. Obviously, 17 million a piece. You know, 12 million to Vuvicic, 10.5 to Terrence Ross. You know, somehow they got Jonathan Simmons for 6.3 million, and he gets cheaper and cheaper as it goes on. So obviously, they got one contract right. It looks like Aaron Gordon's going to demand max money probably this offseason. They'll have to probably re-sign him. But it was disappointing, and it just showed that this team it just needs a giant shakeup. And obviously, I think firing Frank Vogel was a bad choice. I don't think it was his fault that this team was so poorly constructed. Photos are being released of blackboards with them having all of their free agency targets on the board and who they plan on going after and stuff like that. The Magic are kind of a joke right now. And Steve Clifford, I think, you know, he's someone at least they can maybe get some more defense in place, and he has been around for years. And I think he was an assistant coach for them too, right? When they went to the NBA Finals, yeah, he has history with the Magic. But overall, it just doesn't look good right now for Orlando.
Yeah, you mentioned that Bismack Biyombo contract is very ugly. Obviously, that whole deal with Oladipo and Serge Ibaka just went terrible because obviously they had Ibaka for a while, and they traded him to Toronto and got a lot less value. And then look at Oladipo now with the season he just had with the Pacers. That one definitely stings. Same thing with Tobias Harris. They traded him for like nothing a couple years ago to Detroit, and now look at him. So if they had just kept their draft pick, they'd be in a lot better situation, but obviously not the case. Cap situation is not terrible. You know, they have a good amount of cap space, but like Kory mentioned, a good chance that a lot of that goes to Aaron Gordon.
Yeah, I mean, they have a little tiny money to spend, but Aaron Gordon could get a big offer sheet from a different team this offseason. But I assume Orlando will try to match, but the price of that mean maybe Hazonia, who I actually like a little bit, they may have to let him walk.
I think they don't really like Hazonia because I believe he had an option to become, you know, the tender to become a restricted free agent, and they decided not to go with that. So he's unrestricted. And I feel like Hazonia's a guy that never really has gotten a fair chance in Orlando.
I'd agree with that. I would like to see more Mario. We saw him in a brief stint this year, and he actually kind of surprised.
And he's like a good, you know, he's got some versatility with his size and length. But what are your thoughts on the cap situation, Kory?
Yeah, the cap space is like a lot of teams in this division, crappy. Obviously, you got money locked up in players that are now hard to move. The Biyombo contract is just not going to age well. You need to move one of these front court guys. Even if it's Vuvicic, then it's him. If it's Biyombo, it's Biyombo. You got to get one of those contracts off the book because, as we mentioned, you're definitely going to, you know, you're going to have to match anything Aaron Gordon gets because I don't think you can afford to let a top young prospect go again after what Oladipo and Tobias Harris became. Those two guys flourished. I don't think they're going to want to make the same mistake a third time, but who knows? Maybe they re-sign just to trade him, you know, a season and a half later.
Yeah. Good.
But I would try and get one of the bigger ones and then just maybe package something with like a Terrence Ross or a DJ Augustine, but you're pretty much going to be stuck pack.
Yeah, I think that's the case. Shelvin Mack could be an interesting person to trade because his contract's not guaranteed as well, so you can make the trade and then drop him. Simmons is on a beautiful deal. I think a lot of teams would be interested in him if they're trying to add some bench depth at a good price. Terrence Ross is an interesting one. I'm not really high on him, and I really wouldn't want to play him 10 mil. Vujovic is, you know, he's a decent player. He's definitely had some nice stretches. Injury and defense is a problem for him. Fournier was mentioned a lot at the trade deadline last year. It'd be interesting if someone would want to take on that 17 mil. For the next 3 years, but I'm unsure. I think Biyombo, you pretty much have no chance at moving him. If the cap is
go ahead. I think Fournier does get moved at this deadline upcoming. I just don't see anyone making a move this offseason to get him when you have, obviously the choice of free agency and the draft coming up.
Yeah, that's a great point. At the deadline, when a team's kind of feeling the stress a little bit and they want to make that extra push, he'd be a solid guy to bring in that can give you some scoring because he's not a terrible player. His contract isn't horrendous because he can still play and score. Defensively, he's not going to provide you with a ton, but there's a lot worse contracts out there.
I think he's only 25, 26, so it's not like he's old either. He still has time to perhaps get a little bit better.
Yeah, his hairline just makes him seem a lot older.
I mean, no, that's playing with the Orlando Magic. At the start of the season, it was looking good. Then by January, it was gone.
But I'm talking about this team needs.
I mean, they're so bad, everything basically. They're bad on both ends. They need a lot of shooting, point guard play. They don't have any playmakers really, especially when they got rid of Elfrid Payton and when Fournier went down. So playmaking, shooting, I mean, perimeter defenders. I like Jonathan Isaac. I'm also a little intrigued with Wesley, Nunu, and Simmons. But I mean, they could use. They're in the best player available kind of position. I'll put it as in the draft.
Team needs for me are, someone you can put as a face of the franchise, whether that's through the draft or whether that's maybe building around Aaron Gordon. I don't think anyone's positive or sold on Aaron Gordon. You do have the 6th pick. Maybe you trade the 6th pick for. I mean, that'd be crazy if they did, because there are teams trying to buy into the lottery. But I think you got to attack the draft. Hopefully, you get a big time pick with number 6. I think this draft class is decently deep. I think it's lottery deep. I think you can find a decent player with the at least first 10, 11 picks. And then, of course, in free agency, maybe you bring back Aaron Gordon, and then maybe you can get 1 or 2 smaller guys. But again, it's unlikely because Aaron Gordon's going to demand a ton of cap.
Yeah, this actually might make sense for Orlando to try to trade up and land one of the really, really big fish in this draft. Obviously, there's been some talk about Sacramento or Memphis being willing to trade down. And obviously, at the 6th spot, they would have to give up something, but not as much as other teams. So that'd be an option. I think direction, you guys pretty much nailed it. This team needs to decide what they're going to be going forward, who's going to be that star, who they're going to build around. And they've just kind of been wishy-washy for the last 5 years, like Evan mentioned, kind of the Sacramento of the East. They just need to decide what they're going to do and go with that way. And if it fails, it fails. But they just need to have some type of direction. And right now, it just doesn't feel like they have any.
Yeah, and I could see them going, either way, either trading their veterans, Fournier or Vucevic, which I think is both possible, especially Vucevic. I mean, before he got injured, he was putting up numbers last year. And I know he can really score, and he's super skilled, and he has a legit 3-ball now. So that's why I thought floating him to a contender like Milwaukee, who could use like a shooting big, makes some sense. But I could also see Steve Clifford running 1,000 post-ups for him a game. So, I mean, they got to pick one way to go, and I think it should be try to go young and, start by trading Fournier and Vucevic.
Looking at team free agents, we already talked Aaron Gordon, obviously being a restricted free agent, Hazonia, Aaron Aflalo, Maurice Bates. There's a couple guys on this team that are decent, but other than Aaron Gordon, is there anybody they really need to worry about bringing back?
No. Well, I mean, if Hazonia.
Yeah, if you can bring back Hazonia, I bring him back, but it looks like you're going to let all these guys walk to bring back the prize fish of Aaron Gordon.
What do you guys think about Aaron Gordon? What do you think about, who's going to offer him a big deal? Are they just going to come out and max him right away? Or are they going to wait till he signs an offer sheet? What do you think is going to be Aaron Gordon's free agency like?
I could see a team offering him to a sizable offer sheet. I mean, I don't think like a max or anything like that, but close to it. I mean, he's still so young. And I mean, last year he showed some flashes of adding a 3-pointer. I think he was around above the league average at 35%. He's got some defensive versatility. Obviously, consistency is still an issue, but I am sure there's tons of teams who are still very high on him.
Yeah, I think Aaron Gordon will get a max contract from a couple teams. I think some teams are going to just throw money at him. Maybe not even with maybe go the Brooklyn Nets approach and just ruin some other team's cap space by giving him max money. I wouldn't be
a bad idea.
I think the Pacers. I was gonna probably talk about this at some point on some pod, so I guess it's now. I think if Thaddeus Young does opt out of his player option, I think the Pacers become real players to go after Aaron Gordon. They have this young team already, and I think Aaron Gordon would kind of fit with the tempo and maybe develops into a supercharged Blake Griffin. But I think there's a lot of teams out there that are going to be interested in Aaron Gordon because I think he is the best restricted free agent out there.
And I think if you're Orlando, you can't afford to lose him for nothing. So maybe if you don't want to match him, maybe you get him in a sign and trade with the Pacers and you try to get something back at least.
Yeah, they get a Darren Collison or a Bogdanovich possibly, which isn't anything great, but those guys will at least keep you consistent or competitive.
Or, maybe you try to get those guys that are in a bigger deal, or you're just trying to shed some cap and you're going after somebody else. But best case scenario for Aaron Gordon, what do you guys think he can be in this league? Can he be an all-star, or is he getting close to his peak right now?
I would still bet on him making an all-star game once or twice in his career. I think he'll be around at a borderline all-star player at his peak. A guy who can average 18 and 8 and be a pretty good versatile defender.
I think this might be absurd. I don't know. I can't live with that. I think he could be better than Blake Griffin. I think he could be what we all expected Blake Griffin to possibly become. Obviously, Blake Griffin had a ton of injuries, so he lost a lot of the explosion. But we saw Aaron Gordon kind of develop a somewhat three-point shot a lot quicker than Blake Griffin did in his repertoire. So I think maybe Aaron Gordon could be maybe not the kind of passer Blake Griffin is, but a better scorer and rebounder than Blake Griffin is.
Interesting take. I think it's not out of the realm of possibilities. Like you said, he'd have to improve as a playmaker, tighten up his handle a lot, because that's one area I think Blake's a little bit underrated is his playmaking. But health-wise, obviously Aaron Gordon's been a little bit healthier. He hasn't had as many issues. So, and they both were Blake was a great dunker early in his career. Obviously, injuries have caught up a little bit, and Aaron Gordon is a great dunker. So I think borderline all-star is a real possibility, but in the right system, any player can be a lot better than what we originally anticipated. Possible targets for the Magic in free agency.
They actually do have a little bit of room. So if they could get, maybe even Wayne Ellington in Miami, we talked about, just add a shooter off the bench. They need shooting so desperately. Someone like that. Nothing big, of course, because I think they're going to go young and have the money. But if they could, there's Will Barton of Denver. If they wanted a wing who can score a little bit, and if they're able to open up some payroll, that makes some sense. But I think he may want a little more than the Magic can offer.
Yeah, and also obviously a lot of teams a lot of players are about the money, but I got to think a lot of teams, you don't want to go to Orlando, especially right now. What's the benefit of going to Orlando? Because you're probably not going to make crazy money, and you're definitely not going to win. So maybe a Michael Beasley. A guy who can kind of pass the time. Beasley would probably love playing in Orlando because no one would tell him not to shoot. Maybe a guy like Greg Monroe, if they move one of those guys, they get Greg Monroe, because I don't think Greg Monroe is going to get nearly close to that 21 million here in last year. He's definitely going to be back down to well under 10. So maybe they go after Greg Monroe if they trade one of their big guys. I like the thought of Ellington. I think they're going to really. The Magic will be one of those teams that they're like vultures. They're going to be picking out what's ever left in free agency.
What do you guys think if they don't sign Aaron Gordon, or they move him in a sign and trade and they still have that cap space? Do you think they could go after some of the other big restricted free agents, like a Clint Capella, Jabari Parker, a Zach LaVine, if they do not sign Aaron Gordon back, or they move him in a sign and trade?
Even if they do open up some space, I would still predict that they're relatively quiet and maybe try to build up, a culture and get a little bit better, and then try to go shopping in 2019. Because as Kory said, it's not a hot spot to be, and so there's not a lot of options. So I still think overall it'll be a fairly quiet free agency summer for the Magic.
If they don't go after Aaron Gordon and they decide to go put money elsewhere, I wouldn't be surprised if they go after young guys. So a Jabari Parker perhaps. Maybe I know Zach LaVine's a restricted free agent. We all expect him to get obviously paid from the Bulls, but maybe they just put an offer sheet in.
Dante
Exum, possibly.
Oh, I like that.
I don't know if they would have interest in Marcus Smart, but Marcus Smart could
culture
become,
changer.
Yeah, right. One of the guys who obviously plays great defense. I'm sure Steve Clifford would love to have a guy like Marcus Smart on the team. Maybe a guy like Rodney Hood. who's expected to be a little bit less money than usual. Even like a Katavious Caldwell-Pope, I don't think he's gotten a lot of talk yet on any of our outlets. But he made $17 million last year. I don't think he's going to make anywhere as close to that. Maybe 9-10 million. But he's another guy who's still rather young, and he plays very good defense and can be a solid 3-point shooter.
And they like, some of these young guys would like to get their big paycheck. It doesn't necessarily have to be a ton of money, but a couple of years deal where they're bringing in like 40 mil. I actually wouldn't be surprised if the Magic were to offer Joe Harris a lot of money and like prevent the Nets from signing him just because they need 3-point shooting so bad and things like that. And like Kory mentioned, a lot of the restricted guys, even like somebody like a Joseph Nurkic, if they were to move on from one of their big front court contracts, bring in somebody new, and Nurkic isn't that old. I think if I'm the Magic, what I would do, doesn't mean they're actually going to do it, is if I don't sign Aaron Gordon, or if I do move contracts and open up more space, I'm swinging at some of the restricted free agents and trying to offer some of these young players big money because I need talent. And right now, looking at the roster, there just isn't a ton of young talent to build around.
No, that makes a ton of sense. And Joe Harris in particular, I think, makes a lot of sense in the world for them because they need shooting so badly. Anyway, they could add talent, definitely.
Yeah, they'd probably overpay him, and that would be good for him because obviously he's bounced around the league, between the Cavs and the Nets, and he hasn't gotten a big contract. So I think taking advantage of some of those guys that haven't gotten their big paychecks yet could be something Orlando would do. But they'd still either have to not sign Aaron Gordon back or move one of their big deals. Now talking about the best team in the NBA, the Atlanta Hawks, 24-58.
Woo! I thought they overachieved this year too.
Kory thought they did. I remember his prediction on the outlet. It's savage.
Yeah.
John Collins was a bright spot. Schroeder's been complaining, saying he wants to be traded. Budenholzer and the Hawks had parted ways. They brought in Lloyd Pierce. It looks like another tanking season incoming. What were your thoughts on the Hawks?
You knew the rebuild was coming. You knew they would be terrible. I thought they honestly might only win like 15 to 20 games. So
same.
Especially when Schroeder got hurt early in the season.
I was hoping, man. I wanted 16.
You're sick.
Exactly. Just luckily John Collins was a bright spot. I like Taurean Prince, and they had good coaching with Budenholzer, but there is not a lot there right now. So it's full rebuild. But the good news is they have picks and they have money.
This team sucks. I don't know. It's just obviously they've the era where Atlanta was that kind of a nuisance in the East is currently gone. Like you guys mentioned, there's not like a ton of money on the books, so they have a ton of cap space. Kent Bazemore's making $18 million, which is terrible. Dennis Schroeder making 15.5 isn't actually that bad if you think about it. Obviously he's not fantastic. He doesn't play great defense. His jump shot's kind of inconsistent. But when he is healthy, I think 15.5 for Dennis Schroeder is pretty fair. Obviously Miles Plumlee making 12.5 is a joke. But aside from that, I don't think it's terrible. I think Dwayne Dedmon will probably pick up his player option. Mike Muscala probably picks up his. But again, you still have a lot of cap space. I think Taurean Prince, like you mentioned too, he really surprised this year. He had some really nice games. He kind of reminds me of a young Damari Carroll in a sense, but maybe a better rebounder. But yeah, this team is just they're obviously transitioning. They lost their head coach in Budenholzer, whatever his name is. But it's definitely progress in progress. You have to take a team like this with a grain of salt because you're looking at the young guys like John Collins, who really impressed this year. I think he can be a cornerstone for the future. But you're looking at more of like Nick does with the Nets. Obviously, this year is better for the Nets, but you're looking at these young guys to develop. How can they possibly be a part of the future, and what guys are expendable?
Yeah, I think you look at Prince as Khan as two of those guys that you can move forward with. Everybody else, they're kind of trying out in a sense. But you guys mentioned a cap situation, probably one of the best in the league. I think they can have up to $40 million in cap space. Schroeder's contract is movable. It's more so his attitude. Ken Bazemore's contract isn't quite as movable, but I could see still somebody taking it on. What are your thoughts on the cap situation in Atlanta?
It's pretty good besides the Plumlee, which is obviously awful, and Schroeder's not great, and Bazemore, but I think Bazemore is I think it's possible to move, and I'd throw the idea of throwing him to Houston in exchange for Ryan Anderson in the future first, something like that. It would save Houston money, and Atlanta And I think Atlanta may do a lot of that and just taking picks and just taking on bad salaries.
Yeah, the cap situation for the Hawks is ideal. They could go after a lot of restricted free agents. I mean, that's actually what I think they're going to do because they have all this money. There's a lot of restricted free agents. Maybe they throw money at, like a Zach LaVine or Jabari Parker, try and go after these young guys to possibly bring more young guys in around Dennis Schroeder, Taurean Prince, and John Collins. So the Hawks, for me, are going to aggressively pursue any young talent in free agency. Maybe even a Clint Capella.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think what both of you guys are correct. I think they're probably going to swing at restricted free agents with his cap space and also look to take on plenty of salary dumps and pick up an extra contract. This would be an ideal trade partner for the Nuggets if they want to drop that Fareed contract and give up a pick. Same thing for Washington, like we mentioned earlier. Even if they wanted to make a move with the Hornets in some way to get some of their bad contracts off the
Bring
books.
back Dwight.
Don't. Oh God. But team needs, I mean, they don't obviously have any real needs for the season just because they're not looking to win. So I think just young talent everywhere, and then maybe bringing in like some type of veteran leader that's been known to kind of steady a locker room. When you know a team's going to lose 50 plus games, you always want to have that steadying force.
Yeah, I mean, needs are everywhere. I think Collins and Prince are the only young guys that are locks to remain on the roster in the future. So, wings, a point guard, assuming they move on from Schroeder. I like the restricted free agent idea. Hazonia, I think, makes a lot of sense there to pair a shooting big with Collins. I think that would be kind of fun to watch. But, yeah, they have needs everywhere.
Yeah, I think even Prince could be traded, honestly.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anybody on this team that you look at and say for sure, like, no, we can't trade this player. I think Collins is probably the most must-keep player at this point in time. But even still, John Collins, the must-keep to me isn't like, I mean, I think
they have to keep Collins. I think they have to keep Collins, but I would agree that Prince could be moved in the right deal if it meant that they got another first-round pick. I think they really need Collins, and he's been like a fan favorite. So if you're in a tanking situation and you don't have
right, you got to have somebody.
You got to have something, or like they already have problems filling up that arena. If they didn't have John Collins or Prince, I don't know who would come.
Right, that's fair. But like I said, I think besides Collins, then you can surely almost have any player on this roster with the right offer.
Yeah, no, I think it is a possibility. And, I like Prince's game a lot, but it'll be interesting to see what they do. And team needs, like I said, is just going to be, and Evan said, and Kory, you said as well, best player available, just add young talent. Team free agents, Muscala has the $5 million player option, Dedmon 6.3 player option, and then they got a couple restricted guys, Malcolm Delaney, and a couple, guys have bounced around the league a little bit.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be shocked if Dedmon wants to go play for a contender, and maybe they could do a sign and trade or something like that.
He's solid.
Yeah, I like Dedmon a lot, and I think they could get something for him, so I would definitely explore doing that. Muscala, he's a whatever guy to me. I'm sure they could keep him for cheap, and he's fine front court depth. And then the other guys is just, if the price is right and low, then sure. If not, it's okay.
Yeah, I think almost everybody's gone. I think Muscala accepts his player option and comes back. I think Dwayne Dedmon, he's probably going to talk to his agent. If his agent thinks he can get more than 7.2 million, he'll probably opt in or out. But again, I agree with you guys. I think Dwayne Dedmon's very solid. He comes from the Spurs, obviously. He kind of has that Spurs type of culture kind of like written on him.
Yeah, and he actually, I believe, added a 3-point shot this year. So not only is he a solid guy down low, shooting the three ball a little bit, I think he could, I don't know if he'll get more than 6.3 for this year, but I think he could get like a long-term deal, maybe a 3-year deal or somewhere somebody's like, all right, we'll either have him as our starting center or he's going to be our third big and we don't really mind him. But trades, what do we think trade-wise?
Well, the Dedmon one is I mentioned, and then it's the Schroeder, but Schroeder's value I don't think is as high as the Hawks would like, even though he kind of had a career-high offensive season because he stinks on defense. His contract's not great, and he also has like some legal trouble I heard about. Like,
oh yes, yeah,
so it's something bad. So all bad signs, but they'll explore the market for him, sure. Plumlee, unless they attach a lot of picks, which they won't, is untradeable, and then they'll also try with Bazemore as well. But I think besides that, that's about it.
Yeah, I think they try to move Schroeder. I think Schroeder, you can probably move Schroeder despite the legal issues and whatnot. He's probably the best guy to get. I would love to see them try and move Kent Bazemore, but again, it's when you're looking at trading Kent Bazemore, it's kind of like what contract or who can we pair with Kent Bazemore. There's just not a lot of trade partners for the Hawks at this point in time, unless you package like a Taurean Prince with a Schroeder. I don't know. Maybe
no point either because you're trying to be bad anyways.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
they are very tough to make a deal in the trade machine. Maybe the toughest.
I like the Kent Bazemore Ryan Anderson idea because it could relieve Houston a little bit of salary, and also Bazemore's a player that kind of fits in what they're trying to do. They play a lot of small ball guys that can get all over the place and run, and he gives them some nice activity a little bit too. But I think if you're Atlanta, you're just looking for salary dumps across the board. You have plenty of cap space. You're not going to really attract any big-time free agents. Your best chance is trying to, sign somebody in a big money restricted free agency. So I think you're going to look for taking on some bad contracts and getting some extra first-round picks. A team like Philly who's looking to get rid of Jared Bayless, they'll give you probably 26. Like I mentioned for Reed, Washington, Milwaukee could look to drop some space. There's a couple teams that are really cap-strapped. Even Miami, if they don't have a first-round pick, but it could be a future pick as well. So I think that's what, if you're the Hawks, you're just looking to take on bad contracts, get extra picks, add young talent to the squad.
Yeah.
But free agent targets, what are you guys thinking?
Well, it's interesting because, they do have the space. It's just who wants to go there right now. So I think it'll be more restricted than unrestricted. And as I said, Hazonia makes some sense. Young players with some upside. You could take a flyer on a guy like Nerlens Noel. That also makes some sense. But nothing too big unless they want to try to sign, I guess, a Capella to a huge offer sheet.
I might do that in Atlanta. What do you got to lose? And you're messing up Houston's cap anyways.
Yeah, I'm right there. I think you go out to restricted free agents. Clint Capella. I think Julius Randle could be an interesting guy too.
Yeah, Jabari Parker too. I think Jabari Parker, they might throw a ton of money at him, and he's not going to get better offers.
I agree. Zach LaVine might get some interest from them as well. And then you just look down. And then it would be back to younger guys. Do you want to take a chance on maybe a Rodney Hood, who could be a little bit cheaper? Contavious Caldwell-Pope, he's still young. Maybe even Austin Rivers. I'm sure he's going to accept his player option if he hasn't already. But then you're just looking at, guys who can kind of pass the time, like an Ilyasova. Maybe he comes back, a Michael Beasley. It just really depends on if they're going to get any of those restricted free agents or if they're going to have to settle for, older vets on short deals.
Yeah, honestly, if I'm them, I swing at all restricted free agents. And then, obviously there is a cap cutoff where you need to spend a certain amount of money, but you do want to hold some cap going to the season where you can help facilitate a trade. When you're grabbing an extra first-round pick because you can take on a bad contract that somebody else can make the trade. Dante Exum's another guy I would consider here. I think no really young guards on the roster you want to move forward with. Offer him some good money. Clint Capella, like I said. Jabari Parker, I think they're willing to probably take a risk on him because they don't really have much to lose. They're not going to turn it around in 2 or 3 years, so they could afford to have a bad contract on the books, and it's not going to really matter.
Yeah, exactly. I like the Jabari deal, and there's a guy we haven't – Fred VanVleet, restricted free agent. Maybe they try to sign him to an offer sheet.
Good culture too, just a guy that plays hard.
Exactly, yeah. I think that makes some sense too.
Yeah, this is like a place for restricted free agents, so they want to make some money, have your agent make a call, and if you're young enough, I think if you're under 25 years old, they'd be willing to pay you and take the chance. Just kind of similar, like Kory mentioned, to the Nets, where you're not going to be good soon, so you need to just work up your roster and set yourself in position for the future. But Kory, you want to hit him with our last segment?
Yes. So because LeBron James is the big fish marquee. I said big fish a lot today. I'm not sure why that's in my vocabulary.
Seafood for dinner?
Yeah, no, it's not. We're having the pork tenderloin, I believe.
Nice.
Yeah, right. It's very nice. So this is the LeBron James portion of the podcast. We're going to pretty much rank each team's chances at signing LeBron James, who is the marquee free agent this year. And now we're going to, obviously, in the Southeast. Evan, I'll start with you. What team do you believe in this division possibly has any chance of signing LeBron James? The last division we did we gave every team 0% chance, which was the Northwest, I believe.
Yep.
So Evan, what do you think?
The Orlando
you can say 0 for all if you want. You can say 0 for all. It's fair to say.
I'll give 0 for the Hawks, Magic, Hornets, Wizards, I'll give the Heat a 1 just because he's been there before. But I think the money is just too impossible, and they're not a championship caliber team now. But I'll give Miami a 1.
Yeah, I think I might agree. Maybe give Miami like 1% because obviously Pat Riley has done some magical things. But other than that, I mean, this is almost as bad as the Northwest.
Yeah, I think every team in this division has little to no has no chance. All right, and then I think Miami. I'll give Miami like a 15% chance, only because of, like we mentioned, the Wade is still there. Pat Riley has done some magical things in the past. He's used to Miami, and I think if he's thinking about his legacy, right, and not going from 3 different teams, if he was to leave Cleveland just to go back to Miami, he only played for 2 teams his career. I don't know. Maybe he's thinking like that. I don't think it personally matters, but and maybe they do like a sign and trade for LeBron to get rid of some of those bad contracts, and then they can go after and get another marquee free agent. I don't really know how that would work, but
and the whole thing with Cleveland too in the sign and trade is Cleveland's cap numbers are horrendous, and even if they lose LeBron, they don't want to take on bad contracts because their contracts already suck and they're not going to compete.
Right.
So that's what makes like the sign and trade with Cleveland really hard unless you have first round picks to offer, which Miami doesn't. I mean, even looking at this division, I think the only argument you can make is if he went to Washington, they'd be a contender. But the other 4 teams, even if you add LeBron, they might come out of the East, which isn't saying much, but they wouldn't be a contender to compete with Golden State.
I agree.
None are just even remotely plausible, really.
Yeah, it's another strikeout for the LeBron watch on this division. But that wraps it up today. As always, thanks everybody for listening. And you can check out all of our offseason previews on iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OCHIBasketball.com, Google Play, and Dash Radio. Thank you, Kory, and thank you, Evan.